I've played many Pokemon games. Some may even call me Pokemon Master. But like most 30-something-year-olds that are playing a game clearly aimed and marketed to children a third of my age, I've not been entirely happy with them. The quality of these past few iterations have been subpar. But unlike most, my problem isn't with the graphics. Well, it is, of course it is, but it's not the full story. Pokemon Legends Z-A is the next entry in the Legends series, following on from Pokemon Legends Arceus. There's a lot of similarities between this title and the previous one, as expected from a sequel. Both games also feature the core concept of a mainline Pokemon title. So catching, training, battling, leveling up, and evolution, etc, are all here. Everything you'd expect from a mainline Pokemon game. But where it differs from Legend Arceus is that Legends Z-A has more of a focus on battling than Legends Arceus did. I can already tell that I'm going to get sick of saying the word Legends, but I'm going to continue to do it for the sake of clarity. You are welcome. Legends Arceus reinvented battling and catching when compared to the mainline games. And whilst catching in Legends Z-A is pretty much the same, battling is a whole different story entirely. The new system plays on the core of what Pokemon battling is. You send out a Pokemon, you choose one of 4 attacks, then it's your opponent's turn. Except, turns are gone now for a more active battle style. As you move the trainer around, the Pokemon will follow the trainer, allowing you to at least attempt to avoid attacks, or reposition for a clearer shot at your opponent. You then can select moves not from a menu list, but by pressing one of the 4 face buttons. And once your Pokemon attacks, you then must wait for that move to recharge. The speed in which that recharging happens depends on the attack itself and your Pokemon's speed stat. This plays incredibly well, like insanely well. It essentially keeps the core of what Pokemon battling is, but it creates a more dynamic and faster pace that feels much more like the anime's battles. And some moves even work differently to the core games because of this more open field of play. Take Fire Spin for example. It's now an area of effect style attack that you either sit in and take the damage over time, or move your trainer to a distance that your Pokemon will move out of the area of damage. And this can stall you from making another attack, allowing the opponent time to attack you, or even move your Pokemon out of range for their own attacks. So knowing how and where you're positioned is now a really important part of battling. And that's absolutely amazing. The catching from Arceus is essentially the exact same here, and Pokemon remain visible in the field and can be caught without entering battle. This makes it feel like a much more integrated world, one where you have more of a choice over how aggressive of a Pokemon trainer you are. Speaking of the world, this game is set in the Kalos region, and more specifically entirely within a single city in the region, Lumiose City. The concept of this I really genuinely love. Keeping a game confined to a city that still has an open world design. I mean, after all, cities are massive. The idea of exploring streets and alleyways as well as parks and rooftops is a really appealing concept to me. But there it is. I've now said it twice that conceptually it's a good idea. And so far I've been fairly positive about Legends Z-A, and there's a lot to be positive about, but not a lot to be uniquely positive about. The vast majority of what makes this game good and fun are staples of the Pokemon series. Systems, mechanics, and ideas that have been around for very nearly 3 decades. And that's Legends Z-A's problem. It's a series of this thing is so cool, but here's a glaring problem. So, let's go back. The battle system I just praised the hell out of. And I stand by that, but everything I said only really applies for the first few hours. Once you get further into the game, it devolves to just use the strongest attack and one-shot your opponent. All the idea of strategy that comes with this new twist on the battle system is incredibly exciting, until you reach the point that you can just extreme speed one-shot almost everything. And if you don't manage to one-shot the opponent's Pokemon, almost every single battle you face will feature Pokemon that are under-leveled and under-evolved. So they'll hit you for a tiny amount of damage, if they're even fast enough to attack you before you can get a second attack off yourself. The core of the game revolves around the Z-A Royale, a Pokemon battling competition that has you earn points by battling trainers to earn enough of these points to take on a promotion match to get to the next rank. And I was on the fence about this new system before I played it, but it turns out it's a really great idea, especially for this more battle-focused Legends game. And it's hard to understate how integral this Z-A Royale is to the entire game. It's intrinsically linked to the game's story and makes up the majority of what you'll be doing in the main missions. So, the whole game is built around this Z-A Royale. And yet, once you get to rank V, your next mission has you skip 16 ranks straight to rank F, completely betraying the game's core concept by entirely skipping the vast majority of the ranks. Why? And look, defenders of this skip have said it helps to alleviate any monotony that could arise if you're forced to play every rank, and that the game is also scaled for this skip. It's not though. As I previously mentioned, you end up being over-leveled with little to no effort and just one-shot everything you fight. But then, why base the game around a 26 rank league? It seems completely ridiculous to build the core of a game around something that you then go and betray. Don't make your game based on this ranking system then. Create a new concept that actually works and fits. But my preferred way would be to actually scale the narrative to fit these ranked battles. You see, once you get to those upper ranks, they kind of play out like gym battles, introducing gym leader-like characters that you must complete tasks or side missions before facing off against them to rank up. And for me, scale that very end part up. Most of these characters have a lackey or a right-hand person. These could have been part of the skipped ranks, expanding the characters and the mythology of those higher-up characters, introducing them earlier and weaving them into a more connected narrative. The tasks you need to complete to face these higher ranks could have been moulded into more interesting side stories that integrate the characters and the city better than the final game did, by having you dip in and out of these story arcs as you rank up. And speaking of the story, it is surprisingly not too bad, especially towards the end. And I love the way it connects to and develops storylines from Pokemon X and Y, linking this spin-off to the main series. And here it comes. But it suffers from over-explanation and exposition with constant cutscenes that quite often say not much of anything. And we now get to what I think is the worst fault of the entire game. Even more so than the graphics. Voice acting. Or more accurately, the lack of. I find it utterly insane that the biggest entertainment franchise on the planet that includes anime and movies has no voice acting. But even worse, there's absolutely zero audio from any human characters at all. No gasps, no coughs, no laughs or shrieks. Nothing. I mean, come on! Take a page out of other JRPGs and just voice act the most important lines of dialogue. At least, the very least, do that! And look, I'd personally be fine if it was all in Japanese, just to save money and have one set of voice actors. But I don't think that works with the mass appeal that Pokemon has. So I'd settle for a made-up language, like Midna from Twilight Princess. Or Simlish, the language from the Sims games. Anything to add a bit of tone and some attempt at emotion to the many lines of dialogue. And if the Pokemon Company still doesn't want to fund that, then for the love of Arceus, cut the dialogue down. It's too much. It's constant reams of text that has very little substance in it most of the time. The amount of dialogue and lack of voice acting puts me off paying attention in any way to the story, even if, as I said, it's one of the best the games has ever told. So, now we get to the elephant in the room. Graphics. The reason it's taken me so long to get to this point is that, well, it's dominated the conversation, and I believe that a game is much more than its graphics. For example, let's look at Metaphor ReFantazio. Now yes, this game looks better than Z-A because its art is more stylistic and it leans into its lower fidelity graphics, much harder than Pokemon does. Metaphor ReFantazio and the Persona series know they're on a small budget, and it makes the most of what it can, how it can, as ultimately the gameplay and narrative being told are far more important to both Metaphor and Persona. So why isn't Pokemon given the grace that these games are? Well, I think for one, Pokemon is more mainstream, and that comes with the more mainstream expectation of high fidelity graphics. I personally know a few people that aren't huge gamers. They play games, but ask them what Metaphor ReFantazio is, and whoosh, straight over their head. And that's fine, but these people tend to be more inclined to want Pokemon to look more realistic. They share artistic renders and drawings fans have made of Pokemon if it was real. And whilst I think these are cool, talented novelties, they actually actively want Pokemon to look like that. And they also think that the only reason Pokemon games don't look like that is that the graphics aren't quite there yet, which is completely false. This isn't helped by the fact that Pokemon doesn't lean into its stylization as hard as Metaphor and Persona do. They know they're anime games and they're proud of it, but most people don't think of Pokemon as an anime game. I'd say they think of it more as a game series with an anime. And whilst that may not sound different, it really does change the way we perceive them. Anime games generally don't have high budgets, and certainly not for graphics. There are of course exceptions to this, but in general I'd say animations and environments in anime games are pretty weak. Recent years, or even decades now, have put a big focus on the characters looking great, and this is somewhere I think Legend Z-A does work. Characters and Pokemon are pretty good looking. The biggest issue with Z-A is its buildings and the anti-homeless benches. But mostly the buildings. They're flat and boxy and don't have any substance or character to them. If we look at other anime games, we can see a similar problem. But Pokemon Legend Z-A is making Lumiose City a key focal point of its game. The city is almost a character and feature in itself. So when you put so much emphasis onto this singular element, then you should at least try to make it look good. Now, if I was really trying to defend the game, I'd say the flatness is so megastones, piles of pink rocks you can use Pokemon to smash, need a flat surface to spawn on. Otherwise, it'll look jank as hell. But even then, just like skipping over half of the Z-A Royale, change the system. Make it work. Don't sacrifice key elements of your game for what is inconsequential. But the flatness of the buildings isn't the only problem. The city itself is also flat. There's hardly any elevation, except running across the rooftops, which is also very flat once you're up there. But worse than that, the city looks the same in all 5 of its districts. The tiny differences here do not add up to much of anything, and having the districts have individual architectural styles and having unique people drawn to those architectural styles in them would have done so much to make us believe in this city a little more. But the lack of diverse architecture and believable cultural development isn't the only thing missing from Z-A's Lumiose City. It's far too clean. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not expecting Gotham, and I certainly don't think a dirty, grungy city suits Pokemon's theme of we're all friends and everything will be okay in the end, even though we force animals to beat each other to a pulp until they lose consciousness. Friendship. But come on, where are the cars that aren't taxis? The diversity of objects around the place, moving lorries with people taking boxes in and out, delivery trucks, bicycles. Bikes are a long-standing part of Pokemon, and there's not one bike or bike rack in this whole city. Where are other businesses, supermarkets, cafes with actual variety that don't all just basically look the same? And yeah, maybe a bit of litter or some sign of wear and tear. And if there was an old town area of the city with older buildings that have been maintained over the years. It's just so very, very, very dull. One positive I can say about the city is that there are plenty of Pokemon and people in the city. Enough that it does feel lively, but in the way a theme park feels lively, not a city. It is also easy to navigate, and it feels intentionally easy, like level designers have intentionally made it easy for us to navigate. So that's a plus. So then, at least for me, Pokemon Legends Z-A is another slightly disappointing, underwhelming Pokemon game, but not exactly a bad one. Pokemon seems to exist in this weird zone of expectation versus reality, where we expect this high-budget, AAA, monstrously large experience, but I honestly think if we look at the reality of the situation, it's a low-budget anime JRPG game. That's what Pokemon is, and if we compare it to other titles within that genre, then I kind of think it fits in really well. The issue then is, why? Why is it a low-budget game series? Because not all JRPG games are, and I'm sure there are anime titles with a larger budget than Pokemon gets too. So why won't the biggest media franchise in history spend more money on its games? Well, that's probably a topic for a whole different video. And if you want to see that video, make sure you subscribe. But back to Legends Z-A specifically. I really enjoyed it. It's far from perfect, but it is a Pokemon game, warts and all. And I enjoy Pokemon games. In the first few hours, I was so excited for its potential. My mind went crazy with strategy, with the new battle system, and how speed must now be even more important. And it is, kind of. Look, there's a lot to say about Legends Z-A. I've played online, and I've not talked about that. I've not mentioned other shortcomings, such as there being no downside to missing the Pokeball throw. Like, seriously, why even buy these things? Like, there has to be a downside. That's why you purchase them, so that if you miss, there's a downside, but you can just walk up to a guy and get the ones that you've missed. What's the point of that? And there are other positives, like research tasks and side missions to keep you busy, or the raid-like Mega Evolution battles that change up battling even more. So, Legends Z-A has been one of the few games that I have changed my review score in my head so many times as I played it. Even now, I'm unsure. But if you were to force me, then Pokemon Legends Z-A on Switch 2 is a C. Despite all of its flaws, and there are many, it's still the franchise we love. And it still delivers on the catching and battling. And the new battle system is a welcome mix-up, even if it doesn't quite deliver to its fullest potential. While the Pokemon and characters looking bright and colourful are arguably the best they've looked to date, the environment leaves a lot to be desired. And I don't think it being a Switch 1 game scaled up for Switch 2 is enough of an excuse for how dull and lifeless the city itself is. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and share this video with a Pokemaniac. And let me know in the comments below who is your favourite Pokemon. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.